July 2019. A Tuesday afternoon in Lancaster, Kentucky. The temperature is pushing 94 degrees. The air is thick, suffocating, the kind of heat that makes your clothes stick to your skin. Alan Sparks is doing what he does every week during the summer months, mowing the lawn around his family's property. Back and forth across the grass. The rhythm is familiar. Predictable. Mindless. And then there's the smell. At first, it's faint. A whisper of something wrong carried on the breeze. Easy to dismiss. Easy to explain away. Living on a farm, you get used to certain odors. Death is part of the cycle out here. Raccoons hit by cars. Possums caught by the dogs. Field mice that crawl into walls and never crawl back out. Animals die. They decompose. That's just how it is. Alan figures that's what this is. Something crawled under the shed or died near the strawberry patch out back. He's smelled it before. He'll smell it again. He grabs a shovel. Cover the spot with fresh dirt. Goes about his day. Problem solved. Or so he thinks. But over the next 7 days, the smell doesn't fade like it should. It doesn't dissipate into the Kentucky summer air. It grows. It intensifies. It becomes something you can't ignore, can't walk past, can't pretend isn't there. By the following Tuesday, the odor is so overwhelming that Alan can barely stand to mow near that section of the property. The flies are everywhere. Swarming. Frantic. He makes another pass around the strawberry patch. And that's when he sees it. Recent rains have washed away some of the dirt he'd shoveled over the spot a week earlier. And there, just beneath the surface, barely hidden, is something that doesn't belong. Something black. Plastic. Black plastic sheeting, torn in one corner, exposed to the air. Alan stops the mower. Cuts the engine. Stands there in the sudden silence with only the sound of insects and his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. He's staring at that patch of ground, and his mind is racing because he knows. Everyone in Lancaster knows. Everyone in this tight-knit rural community has been talking about it for 6 months. The missing girl. The mother of 4. 22 years old. Vanished after a night out in Lexington. Last seen on security cameras leaving a bar with 3 men. One of those men was his son. The police came to this property back in January. They searched the house. They searched the outbuildings. They walked this land with trained eyes and found nothing. Nothing suspicious. Nothing out of place. They left, and life went on. But now, standing in the July heat, 6 months later, staring at black plastic barely hidden under Kentucky soil, Alan Sparks knows exactly what he's looking at. He can feel it in his gut. In his bones. This isn't a dead animal. This isn't something he can cover up and forget about. 19 inches below the surface of that strawberry patch is Savannah Spurlock. And the truth about what happened to her, the truth about who killed her and buried her like garbage in a vegetable garden while her family searched desperately for answers, is about to destroy everything. If you're interested in more true crime cases like this, make sure to subscribe to this channel. We cover the cases that matter, the stories that need to be told, and we do it with respect for the victims and their families. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. To understand how Savannah Spurlock ended up in that ground, we have to go back. Back 6 months. Back to January 2019. Back to a young woman who was drowning under the weight of circumstances she never saw coming. Savannah Marie Spurlock was 22 years old. Born and raised in Richmond, Kentucky, a small town about 30 miles south of Lexington where everybody knows everybody's business. Where your reputation follows you from grade school to graduation and beyond. Where privacy is a luxury nobody really has. She was a mother. Not just a mother of 4 children. 4. At 22 years old. But here's what most people didn't know, what even her close friends didn't realize: those twins, the youngest 2, had just been born 5 weeks earlier. 5 weeks. She was still recovering. Still bleeding. Still experiencing the hormonal earthquake that follows childbirth. Still trying to wrap her mind around the fact that she'd walked into that delivery room expecting 1 baby and walked out having delivered 2. Nobody had told her there were twins. No ultrasound had caught it. No doctor had prepared her. And when those babies came, when she realized what was happening, the shock of it, the sheer overwhelming impossibility of it, hadn't even had time to wear off before everything fell apart. Something happened at the hospital after the delivery. The details remain locked away in medical records and family grief. Private. Protected. But the outcome was clear and devastating. Savannah went home without her newborns. Her ex-boyfriend, the father, took the twins. And Savannah returned to her mother Ellen's house, separated from her babies, drowning in postpartum confusion and a grief so profound she couldn't even name it. Her body was recovering from delivering 2 children. Her mind was fracturing under the weight of losing them. And she had no idea how to fix any of it. 14 days after giving birth, Savannah made another mistake. She got behind the wheel when she shouldn't have. Maybe she wasn't thinking clearly. Maybe the depression had taken hold. Maybe she was just trying to feel something other than the emptiness. But the police pulled her over. Administered a test. DUI. A court date was set for Monday, January 7th. Now, on top of everything else, she was facing legal consequences. Potential jail time. Fines she couldn't afford. Another black mark on her record. Another thing she'd have to explain to her children when they were old enough to ask. The walls were closing in. Every direction she looked, there was another problem she didn't know how to solve. Another responsibility she wasn't ready for. Another mistake compounding the last. She was 22 years old, and she was suffocating. She needed air. She needed one night to feel like herself again. One night to forget. Thursday evening, January 3, 2019. The sun had already set. Kentucky winter meant darkness came early, cold and absolute. Savannah made a decision. She was going out. Just for one night. One night to remember what it felt like to be young and free and not responsible for anything. One night to forget about the twins she couldn't hold. To forget about the court date looming over her. To forget, even for a few hours, about all of it. She told her mother, Ellen, a small lie. A harmless one. She was just borrowing the car to pick up some food. She'd be back soon. 20 minutes, maybe 30. Just running a quick errand. But Savannah had already made plans with her friend Jocelyn Hutch. They were going to drive to Lexington, about 25 miles north, and meet up with another friend, Dion Johnson, for Thursday drink specials. No responsibilities. No judgment. No babies crying. No court dates. No ex-boyfriends. Just music and drinks and dancing and feeling alive. Savannah got ready carefully that evening. She looked at herself in the mirror and chose her outfit with precision. The kind of outfit that would get attention. That would make her feel beautiful. Desirable. In control. She grabbed a small clutch purse, just enough room for her phone, some cash, and lipstick. She left her large purse locked inside her mother's car in the driveway. She wouldn't need it. This was just one night out. And even though it was January in Kentucky, even though temperatures were dropping below freezing, even though frost was already forming on car windshields, Savannah didn't bother with a coat. Why would she? They'd be inside bars all night anyway. Running from the car to the door. It didn't matter. She walked out of her mother's house around 7:30 that evening. Got in the car. Started the engine. And drove away into the January darkness. Ellen Spurlock watched her daughter leave that evening. She stood at the window and watched the taillights disappear down the street. She had no way of knowing it would be the last time she'd see Savannah walk out that door. No way of knowing that the small lie about picking up food would be the last real conversation they'd ever have. No way of knowing that in less than 12 hours, her daughter would be dead. Murdered. And that it would take 6 months of searching, 6 months of sleepless nights and unanswered prayers, before she'd finally know the truth. That same Thursday evening, about 40 miles north of Richmond, 3 men were making their own plans. David Sparks, 24 years old. Brandon Lewis. Isaiah Thompson. They worked together on the night shift at a local factory. The work week was done. Friday was here. They wanted to blow off steam the way young men do. Cheap drinks. Loud music. Maybe meet some women. Nothing complicated. Just 3 guys in their 20s looking for a good time. On the surface, David Sparks seemed ordinary. More than ordinary, he seemed boring. Forgettable. The kind of person you'd pass on the street and never think about again. He'd recently moved into a rental house in Lancaster, a rural community about 40 miles south of Lexington. Small town. Farm country. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and know all their neighbors by name. David was quiet. Deeply uncomfortable in social situations. The kind of person who faded into the background unless someone forced him into conversation. His co-workers knew him as a loner who kept to himself. Ate lunch alone. Didn't participate in workplace small talk. When the shift ended, he left immediately. No hanging around. No bonding. He went to church with his parents every Sunday. His uncle had been a pastor for years. His family was respected in the community. Everything about David's exterior, everything about the face he showed the world, screamed normal. Safe. Harmless. But there was something else. Something hidden. Something he'd never shown anyone except the pages of a journal he kept locked away in his bedroom. In his own handwriting, he'd confessed things that should have terrified anyone who read them. He'd written about feeling nothing when people around him died. About creating fake personas to fit in, to seem normal, to hide what he really was. He'd written about his mother and wondered how he could ever tell her the truth, that she'd given birth to something wrong. Something broken. Someone who wouldn't hesitate to squeeze the last breath from another human being or plunge a knife into their chest and feel nothing. Not guilt. Not remorse. Nothing. David had kept this part of himself locked away for 24 years. But tonight, he would finally let it out. The 3 men started their evening at Two Keys Tavern in downtown Lexington. Popular place. Good music. But when they got to the door, the cover charge was steep. $20 each just to get inside. They looked at each other. Looked at the line of people waiting to pay. Decided it wasn't worth it. They'd find somewhere else. They ended up at a place called the Other Bar. Smaller venue. Cheaper drinks. Less crowded. They settled into a corner booth near the back with Jack and Cokes, scanning the room. Watching. Waiting. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, Savannah and her friends arrived. The pre-gaming had done its job. Savannah was already tipsy, loose, her inhibitions lowered, ready to have the kind of fun she hadn't had in months. Years, maybe. They ordered drinks. Took photos for Instagram. Laughed too loud. Danced. Lived in the moment. Another friend, Kayla Hamilton, joined them briefly. But by 2 in the morning, she was done. She had work early the next day. She said her goodbyes, found a ride, and left. Not long after, Dion Johnson left too. He had court the next morning. Couldn't afford to be late or hungover. Savannah and Jocelyn assured him they'd be fine. They'd figure out a ride home. Don't worry about us. We're having a great time. But then, sometime around 2:15, something happened. Savannah and Jocelyn got into an argument. The details of what they argued about were never made public. Maybe it was something small that got blown out of proportion by alcohol. Maybe it was something that had been building for weeks. But whatever it was, it got loud. Voices rising above the music. Hands gesturing. Other patrons turned to look. The bar's bouncers noticed. They moved in. Separated the women. Warned them both to quiet down or leave. This wasn't the kind of establishment that tolerated drama. Jocelyn was done. Fed up with the night, fed up with the argument, ready to go home and sleep it off. She found a ride and left around 2:30 in the morning. Savannah promised she'd be fine. She could get home on her own. She'd find someone to give her a ride, or she'd call an Uber, or she'd figure something out. Don't worry about me. I'm good. And then she was alone. Completely alone. No friends. No safety net. No one looking out for her. And that's when everything changed. Alone now, Savannah began working the room. Moving from group to group. Flirting with different men at the bar. She was beautiful, confident despite everything going on in her life. And the alcohol had stripped away every last bit of caution. Security cameras captured her that night. Smiling. Dancing. Touching someone's arm. Laughing at a joke. Living completely in the moment. She had no idea that someone was watching her. Really watching her. Studying her. Waiting. David Sparks and his two coworkers had just ordered their second round when Savannah approached their table. She was forward. Flirtatious. Exactly what they'd been hoping to find when they came out that night. They talked. Laughed. Bought her drinks. She bought them drinks. The conversation flowed easy and loose, lubricated by alcohol and the temporary intimacy that happens between strangers in bars. Last call approached. The bar would close soon. Someone made a suggestion, probably David, though no one would later remember exactly who said it first. The night doesn't have to end. We could keep the party going somewhere else. Keep drinking. Keep having fun. Brandon had just moved to Kentucky from South Carolina. He was staying with family. Couldn't bring a group back there. Isaiah had recently moved into an apartment, but he hadn't bought furniture yet. Empty rooms. Nowhere to sit. That left David's house in Lancaster. A 40-mile drive south into rural Kentucky farm country. Savannah agreed. Why not? What else was she going to do? Go home to her mother's house and face reality? Face the twins she couldn't see? Face the court date? No. Not yet. Not when she was finally having fun. Security footage from a nearby parking garage captured the group leaving together around 3:30 in the morning. The video is grainy, black and white, but the figures are clear enough. Savannah walking between the three men. She's steady on her feet. Not stumbling. But clearly intoxicated. You can see it in the way she moves. And even in the colorless footage, you can see she's wearing no coat despite the freezing January temperature. This would become the last confirmed video footage of Savannah Spurlock alive. The group split into two vehicles. Brandon and Isaiah took Isaiah's silver Nissan Pathfinder. Savannah rode with them in the back seat. They took Route 52 south, a slightly longer route that avoided highway tolls. David drove alone in his black Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck, taking a different route. Faster. More direct. As Savannah rode through the dark Kentucky countryside in Isaiah's vehicle, her phone rang. FaceTime. Her mother's name on the screen. Ellen had been trying to reach her daughter for hours. Growing increasingly worried. Increasingly angry. Where are you? Why aren't you home? Why did you lie to me? Savannah finally answered. Ellen would later tell investigators what she saw on that FaceTime call. She could see Savannah was in someone else's car. She caught a glimpse of one of the two men Savannah was with. The background showed rural roads. Farmland. Darkness. Nothing familiar. Nothing Ellen recognized. Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? Savannah's answers were vague. Dismissive. She was fine. Everything was fine. She'd get a ride back to her car in the morning. Don't worry, Mom. I'll be home soon. I promise. Then she ended the call. And she switched her phone to airplane mode so her mother couldn't track her location. Couldn't call back. Couldn't interrupt the night again. That FaceTime call would haunt Ellen Spurlock for the rest of her life. It was the last time she would see her daughter's face. The last time she would hear her voice. If only she'd pressed harder. If only she'd demanded Savannah tell her exactly where she was going. If only she'd somehow convinced her to come home right then. But she didn't. She couldn't. And Savannah rode on through the darkness toward a rental house in Lancaster, Kentucky, where she had less than 2 hours left to live. The group arrived at David's rental house in Lancaster around 4:30 in the morning. The small home sat on a quiet street in a neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened. Where people raised families and grew old and knew their neighbors. Where crime was something you saw on the news, not something that touched your life. David's parents lived nearby. Just down the road on a larger property that included their house, several outbuildings, and a fenced strawberry patch where they grew fruit every summer. Inside David's house, the group continued drinking. David produced a bottle of Crown Royal whiskey from his kitchen cabinet. He and Savannah went shot for shot while Brandon and Isaiah paced themselves. They had to drive home eventually. Needed to stay relatively sober. But David and Savannah matched each other drink for drink. Music played from someone's phone. Savannah danced. Spun around the living room. She was having fun. Exactly the kind of night she'd wanted. No responsibilities. No judgment. Just alcohol and music and attention. But then, according to the testimony that would later emerge, the dynamic shifted. Brandon would later describe, in explicit detail during his police interrogation, how each of the three men took turns going into David's bedroom with Savannah. There was kissing. Touching. Physical contact of varying degrees. But according to Brandon, no one had actual intercourse with her. She was willing at first. Participating. Enjoying the attention from three men. As dawn approached, Savannah began to fade. The alcohol hit her hard. Hours of drinking catching up all at once. She went from flirtatious to drowsy. From coherent to incoherent. Her words started slurring. Her movements became uncoordinated. Around 5:30 in the morning, she started dozing off on David's love seat recliner, dipping in and out of consciousness. David and Isaiah helped her to her feet. One man on each side, supporting her weight. They walked her back to David's bedroom and laid her on his queen-sized bed. Fully clothed. She was drunk. Barely conscious. Unable to protest or participate in anything. David closed the bedroom door. Turned off the lights. When he came back out to the living room, Brandon and Isaiah were getting ready to leave. Brandon and Isaiah hung around for another 15, maybe 20 minutes. Finishing their drinks. Talking about nothing. But as they prepared to leave, as they grabbed their coats and keys, Isaiah said something. Something that would haunt him for months afterward. "Are you sure we should leave her here?" Brandon looked at him. "Why?" "I don't know," Isaiah said. "David really wanted to have sex with her." Brandon brushed it off. Shrugged. Whatever David did or didn't do after they left wasn't their problem. Savannah was passed out. The night was over. Time to go home. They left David's house around 6 o'clock in the morning. Got in Isaiah's silver Pathfinder and drove back north toward Lexington. The sun was starting to rise. Friday morning. They'd both be exhausted at work later, but it had been a good night. They'd met a girl. Had some fun. That's all that mattered. Neither of them looked back. David Sparks would later claim he fell asleep on his love seat recliner around 6:15 that morning. Exhausted from drinking and the long night. He told investigators that Savannah woke him around 9:30, asking for his address so she could call for a ride. He gave it to her. Then he dozed off again while she went back into the bedroom to make her call. When he woke again around 11:30, she was gone. His front door was unlocked. The house was empty. She must have found a ride and left while he was sleeping. That was his story. Simple. Clean. Plausible. But security footage from a neighbor's camera told a very different story. The footage showed David loading large black trash bags into the bed of his Silverado pickup truck early that morning. Multiple trips. Carrying heavy bags from his house to the truck. His movements were careful. Deliberate. The bags looked full. Waited. Then he drove away. When investigators later obtained a search warrant and entered David's house, they found something disturbing. The house was immaculate. Everything in its place. No dishes in the sink. No empty bottles. No clutter of any kind. One officer would later note in his report that the bottom half of every wall in the house appeared to have been recently wiped down. Cleaned. Scrubbed. The house had the sterile feeling of a crime scene that someone had frantically tried to erase. What happened during those hours when David Sparks and Savannah Spurlock were alone in that house? What happened after Brandon and Isaiah drove away, leaving an unconscious woman with a man who had written about wanting to kill? David would never fully explain. But the evidence would eventually tell the story his words refused to reveal. Back in Richmond, Ellen Spurlock's worry was escalating into panic. Friday morning came. Then Friday afternoon. Then Friday evening. No word from Savannah. No texts. No calls. No social media posts. Ellen called her daughter's phone over and over. Straight to voicemail. That airplane mode Savannah had activated in the car was still on. By Saturday morning, Ellen was frantic. She drove to Lexington, searching the areas where she knew Savannah liked to go. Asked friends if they'd seen her. Posted on Facebook. Nothing. No one had seen her. No one had heard from her. Saturday evening, one of Savannah's friends found Ellen's car. It was parked across the street from Dion Johnson's house in Lexington, exactly where Savannah had left it Thursday night. The car was locked. Untouched. Savannah's large purse was still inside, containing her identification, money, and personal belongings. No signs of forced entry. No signs of struggle. Just an empty car and a missing girl. Ellen contacted Richmond police and canceled the stolen vehicle report she'd filed Thursday night when Savannah hadn't come home. But now she had a much bigger problem. Her daughter had been gone for more than 60 hours with no contact whatsoever. This wasn't like Savannah. Even when she stayed out late, even when she made bad decisions, she always checked in eventually. Always. Sunday came and went. Still nothing. Monday arrived. January 7th. The day of Savannah's court appearance for the DUI charge. Ellen knew that if there was any day Savannah would show up, would make contact, it would be this day. Missing court meant a warrant. Meant jail time. Savannah knew that. But Monday came and went. The court date passed. Savannah never appeared. Never called. Never sent a message. Ellen knew then, with absolute certainty, that something was terribly wrong. Monday evening, Ellen filed an official missing persons report with Richmond Police Department. Within hours, Savannah's face was on every local news broadcast. Her photo spread across social media. Facebook. Instagram. Twitter. Friends shared it thousands of times. The community mobilized immediately. Search parties organized. Volunteers distributed flyers across central Kentucky. Someone set up a tip line. Someone else started a reward fund. Law enforcement agencies across the region coordinated their efforts. Richmond Police. Lexington Police. Kentucky State Police. County Sheriff's Departments. Everyone was looking for Savannah Spurlock. And they had one crucial piece of evidence. Security footage from that parking garage downtown. Grainy. Black and white. But clear enough. Savannah leaving the other bar around 3:30 in the morning with 3 unidentified men. Within days, tips started coming in. People who'd been at the other bar that night. People who recognized the men in the footage. The 3 men were identified. David Sparks. Brandon Lewis. Isaiah Thompson. Richmond police contacted them immediately. Asked them to come in for questioning. All 3 agreed. All 3 showed up voluntarily. Brandon spoke first. Brandon Lewis sat across from investigators and told them everything. He didn't lawyer up. Didn't refuse to answer. He described the entire night in explicit detail. Meeting Savannah at the other bar. How drunk she was. How forward she'd been. The decision to continue the party at David's house. The 40-mile drive to Lancaster. He admitted to drinking. The physical contact in David's bedroom. He confirmed that Savannah had been extremely intoxicated by the time they put her in David's bed. Barely conscious. Unresponsive. She was out, Brandon told investigators. His exact words. Like a dead stick. She was cold. I'm talking about the unconscious. Was she alive when you left the house? An investigator asked. Yeah. Most definitely. I know she was alive. But Brandon couldn't vouch for what happened after he and Isaiah left around 6 in the morning. He hadn't been there. He didn't know. He admitted that Isaiah had expressed concerns about leaving Savannah alone with David. He acknowledged that David had really wanted to have sex with her. But he insisted he'd had no part in whatever came next. Investigators immediately pulled Brandon's phone records. The data showed his phone pinging off towers along Route 52 from Lancaster back to Lexington in the early morning hours of January 4, exactly as he'd claimed. The timeline matched perfectly. Isaiah Thompson's interrogation covered similar ground. He confirmed everything Brandon had said. The drinking. The physical contact. Savannah's level of intoxication. He described David as quiet, awkward, a loner who kept to himself at work. When investigators pressed him about whether David could have hurt Savannah, Isaiah struggled to answer. I don't think he would, Isaiah said. But his voice was uncertain. But is it possible? The investigator pushed. I can't point a finger at something I don't know. Isaiah's phone records matched Brandon's. Pinging off the same towers. Same route. Same timeline. A forensic examination of Isaiah's silver Pathfinder revealed no evidence of foul play. No blood. No signs of struggle. Nothing suspicious. Both men voluntarily submitted DNA samples. Fingerprints. Allowed searches of their vehicles and residences. Neither of them had anything to hide. David Sparks was questioned multiple times. He came in voluntarily. No lawyer at first. He surrendered his cell phone. Allowed the search of his house and truck. Provided DNA. Fingerprints. He cooperated fully. And his story remained absolutely consistent across multiple interrogations. Savannah had been alive and well when Brandon and Isaiah left around 6 in the morning. He fell asleep on his recliner. She woke him around 9:30 to ask for his address so she could call a ride. He gave it to her. Dozed off again. When he woke around 11:30, she was gone. The front door was unlocked. She must have left. He seemed genuinely confused about why police were treating him like a suspect. He hadn't done anything wrong. He'd just let her crash at his place after a night of drinking. That's it. She left. End of story. But investigators weren't buying it. Too many things didn't add up. The neighbor's security footage showing him loading trash bags. The spotless condition of his house. The fact that Savannah's phone had never left airplane mode, never pinged off any towers after arriving in Lancaster. If she'd called for a ride, her phone would have reconnected to the network. But it never did. Search warrants were obtained. David's house. His truck. Everything was photographed, documented, seized. In a drawer beside his bed, investigators found multiple firearms. A .308 rifle. A Derringer pistol. The same drawer contained an assortment of knives. And a large supply of condoms. Blood spatter appeared on several walls. The bedroom. Door frames. Forensic technicians carefully swabbed each spot. Photographed everything. The samples were sent to the state crime lab for DNA analysis. And then they found the journal. The notebook was hidden in David's bedroom. Pages and pages of handwritten entries. His thoughts. His confessions. Words that read like a manifesto from someone who knew exactly what kind of monster he was. How do you explain the feeling of nothingness to a normal person? That death befalling on all those around you has no effect. I felt so alone, so damaged, that I've created fake personas around everyone I know. Hoping to fit in. To feel accepted. It only makes me angrier. I keep the dark true side of myself hidden in the deepest places of my mind and have done so successfully for years. Hell, my whole life. I feel no true love for anything. The entry continued. Now that I know what I really am, I see a greater need to hide my true self. But I just want to be free. I stay in a constant state of aggravation. Nothing seems to help anymore. And then the most damning passage. How do you look your mother in the eyes and tell her you are a born psychopath? That she gave birth to a monster. Someone who wouldn't care a bit to squeeze the last breath of life out of another human. Or to plunge a knife into their chest and smile about it. David's attorney would later claim these entries were written during a period of deep depression. That they didn't reflect his actual personality or intentions. That lots of people write dark things in journals without ever acting on them. But investigators couldn't ignore the eerie parallel between David's written fantasies about killing and Savannah's disappearance. The DNA results from the blood spatter came back. None of it matched David. None of it matched Savannah. Investigators theorized the blood came from a previous tenant. David had only moved into the rental house 5 weeks before Savannah disappeared. The blood meant nothing. Weeks turned into months. February. March. April. Still no sign of Savannah. Searches of the local landfill with cadaver dogs turned up nothing. Police canvassed the countryside around Lancaster. Checked abandoned buildings, drainage ditches, wooded areas, empty fields. Nothing. The investigation expanded to include David's parents' property. The house where David had moved back in with his mother and father after the searches. Investigators obtained another warrant. Searched the main house. The outbuildings. Approximately 1 acre of surrounding land. They found nothing suspicious. David continued working at his factory job. Brandon and Isaiah tried to move forward with their lives, haunted by guilt and what-ifs. Should they have insisted Savannah leave with them? Should they have called someone to pick her up? Could they have prevented whatever happened? Ellen appeared on national television. Good Morning America. ABC World News Tonight. Her voice breaking as she pleaded for information. I believe she could have been taken against her will. This is the worst nightmare. We're leaning on our faith in God and each other. Our family. Our friends. She looked directly into the camera. Spoke as if Savannah might be watching somewhere. Savannah, I would say to her, please come home to your family and friends. We miss you. We love you more than you will ever know. The twins went to live with their father along with Savannah's 2 older children. Ellen kept Savannah's room exactly as she'd left it. Clothes in the closet. Photos on the dresser. She couldn't bring herself to change anything. Couldn't accept that her daughter might never come home. 6 months passed. Spring turned to summer. The case grew cold. Tuesday afternoon, July 9, 2019. Alan Sparks was mowing his lawn. We've come full circle now. Back to where this story began. Back to that smell. Back to the black plastic showing through the soil near the strawberry patch. Alan had covered that spot a week earlier. Assumed it was a dead animal. But the smell kept getting worse. And now, with the dirt washed away by rain, he could see what he'd been trying not to see. What he'd probably known, on some level, was buried there all along. His son had been questioned. His property had been searched. The police had found nothing. But 6 months later, standing in the July heat with flies swarming around him, Alan Sparks couldn't deny the truth anymore. He called his wife, Alta, when she got home from work that evening. Together, they walked down to the strawberry patch. Alan carefully dug around the plastic with his shovel. As dirt fell away, he could see it clearly now. Black trash bags. What appeared to be a small rug inside. Flies everywhere. The smell was overwhelming. They covered everything back up. Went to the house. Sat in silence. Initially, they tried to convince themselves someone else must have put something in their strawberry patch. Some stranger. Some drifter. It couldn't be what they thought it was. It couldn't be connected to their son. But as they talked, as the hours passed, the horrible truth became unavoidable. They needed to call the police. But instead of calling 911 directly, Alan and Alta made a different decision. They called their attorney first. Let him handle it. Let him make the call. On July 10, 2019, their lawyer contacted the Richmond Police Department. There was a suspicious smell and buried plastic bags on the Sparks family property. The police needed to investigate immediately. Richmond police immediately notified Kentucky State Police. A search warrant was obtained within hours. Local and state investigators rushed to the Sparks property, securing the scene with crime scene tape. The FBI dispatched 11 agents to assist with the excavation and evidence collection. As law enforcement descended on his parents' property, as news helicopters circled overhead and cameras set up on the road, David Sparks made a decision. He got in his car. Drove to Richmond. Parked in the lot at Richmond Police Department. Tossed his keys into the back seat. Locked the door. Walked inside. At the front desk, he announced calmly, "I'm going to need a lawyer." Then he sat down and waited. At the strawberry patch, investigators carefully excavated the burial site. Working slowly. Methodically. Documenting every inch. Every layer of soil was removed. Every piece of evidence is photographed from multiple angles. Just 19 inches beneath the surface, they found them. 3 large black plastic trash bags. Contractor grade. Heavy duty. The kind you'd use for yard work or construction debris. Inside the bags was a small accent rug. The kind you'd buy at Walmart or Target for $20. Decorative. Forgettable. And wrapped within that rug, folded in half to fit inside the confined space, was Savannah Spurlock's body. She was naked. Every piece of clothing was removed. Her feet had been bound together at the ankles with clear packing tape. Wrapped multiple times. Tight. Her body had been compressed, folded unnaturally to fit inside the bags. An animal, probably a dog or coyote, had torn a small hole in one corner of the plastic. That opening was what had allowed the smell of decomposition to escape. Without that tear, without that smell, Savannah might have stayed buried for years. Maybe forever. The July heat and 6 months of burial had caused extensive decomposition. Insects had done their work. Animals had damaged the remains through that tear in the plastic. The state medical examiner determined that establishing an exact cause of death was impossible. Too much decomposition. Too much damage. They couldn't definitively say whether she'd been strangled, suffocated, stabbed, shot, poisoned. The evidence was gone. But the manner of death was ruled a homicide. No question. Based on the circumstances. The burial location. The attempt at concealment. The unnatural positioning. The binding of the victim's feet. This wasn't an accident. These weren't natural causes. This was murder. Search warrants were executed immediately in David's bedroom at his parents' house. Investigators found rolls of black plastic trash bags. The same brand. The same size. Identical to the ones used to wrap Savannah's body. They found rubber gloves. Cleaning supplies. And critically, they found a roll of clear packing tape. During Savannah's autopsy, forensic technicians had carefully unrolled approximately 3 yards of packing tape from her ankles. The binding had been tight. Multiple layers. It took time to remove it without destroying potential evidence. The ragged edge where the tape had been torn from the roll was preserved. Photographed. Documented. Back at the crime lab, forensic examiners compared the ragged edge from Savannah's ankles to the ragged edge on the roll of tape found in David's bedroom. They matched. Perfectly. Like puzzle pieces. The microscopic tears and irregularities lined up exactly. The tape that bound Savannah Spurlock's ankles had come from the roll in David Sparks' bedroom. No question. Investigators also found a backpack in David's closet. Forensic testing revealed tiny amounts of blood on the fabric. Microscopic. Nearly invisible. But there. DNA analysis showed the blood contained genetic material from 2 individuals. David Sparks and Savannah Spurlock. Mixed together. On the same backpack. In David's bedroom. The evidence was overwhelming. Undeniable. David Sparks was arrested and charged with murder, tampering with physical evidence, and abuse of a corpse. He sat in jail awaiting trial for 18 months while prosecutors built their case. While his lawyers tried to figure out a defense strategy. While Savannah's family waited for justice. In the end, David chose to plead guilty rather than face a jury trial. He never explained why he killed Savannah. Never described what happened during those hours when they were alone. Never showed remorse or offered an apology. He simply admitted that he had murdered her and buried her body in his parents' strawberry patch. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office agreed to a plea deal. 50 years for the murder charge. An additional 12 years for tampering with physical evidence. 12 months for abuse of a corpse. All sentences run concurrently, meaning David would serve 50 years total. Prosecutors explained their decision. Without a clear cause of death, without David's confession about his methods, without being able to prove beyond reasonable doubt exactly how he killed her, they feared a jury might not deliver the harshest sentence. They worried about an acquittal. About David walking free. 50 years guaranteed was better than risking everything at trial. David would be eligible for parole in 2039. He would be 44 years old. The sentencing hearing was held via Zoom. COVID-19 had shut down in-person court proceedings. Savannah's family attended virtually. Ellen Spurlock's face filled the screen as she addressed the court. As she faced the man who had murdered her daughter, she spoke of the unbearable pain. The 6 months of desperate searching. The hope that maybe, somehow, Savannah was still alive. The horror of learning she'd been buried just 19 inches underground while investigators searched nearby. While the family held vigils and distributed flyers and prayed for miracles. "You took everything from us," Ellen said. Her voice steady despite the tears. "You took a mother from her children. A daughter from her parents. You buried her like trash. And you let us search for months knowing exactly where she was." David showed no emotion during the hearing. His face remained blank. Passive. He offered no apology. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the pain he'd caused. He simply accepted his sentence and was led away to begin serving his time. Today, David Sparks serves his sentence at the Southeastern State Correctional Complex in Wheelwright, Kentucky. He will remain there until 2039 unless parole is denied. Whether he will ever be released remains to be seen. Brandon Lewis and Isaiah Thompson were never charged with any crimes. They cooperated fully with investigators. Their stories never changed. Their phone records and forensic evidence backed up everything they said. While they made questionable decisions that night, leaving an intoxicated woman alone with a man they barely knew, they committed no crime under Kentucky law. But they have to live with those decisions. With the knowledge that they could have prevented what happened. If they'd insisted Savannah leave with them, if they'd called someone to pick her up, if they'd listened to that voice saying something was wrong, she might still be alive. Savannah Spurlock's 4 children are growing up without their mother. The twins have no memory of the woman who gave birth to them just weeks before her death. Her older children carry the trauma of losing their mother to violence when they were young. When they needed her most. The case highlighted dangers that young women face every day. The risks of drinking with strangers. Of friends separating. Of being left alone with men you've just met. Savannah made mistakes that night. Decisions that put her in danger. But she didn't deserve what happened to her. Nobody does. It raised questions about bystander responsibility. About moral obligations versus legal requirements. Should Brandon and Isaiah have done more? Could they have saved her? The law says they committed no crime. But morality asks different questions. Harder questions. Most haunting is the question of why. Why did David Sparks kill Savannah Spurlock? His journal entries suggest he'd fantasized about murder for years. He'd written about being a psychopath. About wanting to kill. But what triggered that transition from fantasy to reality? What made that night different from every other night he'd managed to control himself? Maybe there was no trigger. Maybe Savannah was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person. She was vulnerable. Intoxicated. Alone. For David, she became what he'd been waiting for his entire life. The perfect victim. The perfect opportunity. The strawberry patch where Savannah was buried has been removed. The Sparks family no longer lives on that property. But the community of Lancaster, Kentucky will never forget what happened there. We'll never forget the young woman whose life was stolen by someone who had been hiding in plain sight all along. Ellen Spurlock continues to honor her daughter's memory. She speaks out about the case. She advocates for missing persons' families. She wants the world to remember that Savannah was more than just a victim. She was a mother. A daughter. A friend. She made mistakes, yes. But she was trying. She was 22 years old and trying to figure out her life. And she deserved the chance to keep trying. Savannah Spurlock was last seen alive on January 4, 2019. She was found on July 10, 2019. In between those dates, her family never stopped looking. Never stopped hoping. Never stopped believing she would come home. And in the end, she did come home. Just not the way anyone wanted. If this case affected you, if you want to help prevent tragedies like this from happening to others, I encourage you to share this video. Awareness saves lives. Look out for your friends. Don't leave people alone when they're vulnerable. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. And if you enjoyed this deep examination into the Savannah Spurlock case, please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit that like button. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on this case. What do you think about the decisions made that night? Could this have been prevented? I read every comment and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and remember, stay safe out there.